Voyage of the Dawn Treader Part 1. Lucy and Edmund Pevensey had been to Narnia twice before, and reigned there as king and queen, alongside their older siblings Susan and Peter. One summer, they were sent to stay with their Uncle Harold, Aunt Alberta and cousin Eustace, who was bossy and mean. Susan had gone to America with their parents, while Peter was studying for an exam. Edmund sat with Lucy in her room, where a painting hung on the wall. It showed a ship with a prow shaped like a dragon's head, sailing in a bright blue sea. They agreed that it looked like a Narnian ship. Eustace was listening at the door and came in to tease them about their silly game, because he didn't believe that Narnia was real. As they all looked at the painting, they saw the waves begin to move. A strong wind blew through the room. They could smell the salt in the air, and sea spray splashed on their faces. Eustace was frightened and moved forward, taking hold of the frame, meaning to break it. Lucy and Edmund tried to hold him back. All three children were dragged into the picture. They found themselves swimming in the sea beside the ship. Eustace clung to Lucy in panic. One of the crew dived in to rescue them, and once they were aboard, Lucy and Edmund realised that he was Caspian, king of Narnia. They were delighted to see him, but Eustace started to cry and demanded to go home. He continued to complain as they shared hot spiced wine. Reepicheep, chief of the Talking Mice of Narnia and a brave warrior, appeared and greeted Edmund and Lucy as old friends, but Eustace was startled to see a talking animal and was rude to the mouse. Eustace went to bed, seasick and unhappy, while Caspian explained to Lucy and Edmund that he had left Narnia under the care of a loyal dwarf and set out to search for 7 lords of Narnia who had been banished to the far east by his uncle Miraz for supporting Caspian's claim to the throne. The lords were called Rebellion, Bern, Argos, Lavramorn, Octesian, Restamar and Reap. The mouse Reepicheep had his own reason for journeying east. He believed that it was the way to Aslan's country, because the lion always came to Narnia from the east. When Reepicheep was a baby, a dryad had given him a promise that he would find his heart's desire in the far east, where the sea becomes sweet, and these mysterious words compelled him to make the voyage. Captain Drinian showed them the route on a map. The ship had sailed from Cair Paravel to Galma, fighting off pirates as they passed Terebinthia, to the 7 isles where they stopped for a feast on the Isle of Bren. They were a couple of days away from the Lone Islands, and all seas beyond there were uncharted territory. Caspian returned to Lucy the flask of healing cordial which Aslan had given to her on her first visit to Narnia. She used a drop from the vial to cure Eustace's seasickness, though he remained sulky and complaining. The next day, Eustace was sufficiently recovered to come up to the deck where he found Reepicheep, admiring the view from the front of the ship. The mouse's long tail hung down, and Eustace caught hold of it and swung the mouse around. Reepicheep retaliated with a few sharp jabs from his sword, rebuking the boy in front of the whole crew and challenging him to a duel, but he refused. The Dawn Treader reached the Lone Islands, Felimath, Dorn and Avra, which had all been Narnian territory for as long as anyone could remember. Caspian, Edmund, Lucy, Eustace and Reepicheep decided to walk across Felimath, which was almost uninhabited, and meet the ship at the other side. They were captured by armed men who planned to sell them as slaves on Dorn and marched them to a boat with Reepicheep protesting loudly all the way. Before the others were taken to the neighbouring island, Caspian was sold to a man on Felimath. The man recognised Caspian as the king of Narnia, and Caspian realised that he was Bern, one of the 7 missing lords who had married a woman from Felimath and settled there. Caspian signalled for the Dawn Treader, and he and Bern boarded the ship. Together they planned to fool Gumpas, governor of Narrowhaven on Dorn, that they had a great fleet of warships on the way. The Dawn Treader would sail past with all their weapons on display, sending signals as if they were communicating with other ships. Caspian, Bern, and some of their people sailed to Narrowhaven the next morning. They were greeted by friends of Bern's who hailed the King of Narnia. Others joined the procession, cheering as the Narnians marched to Governor Gumpas's castle, where their arrival was announced with great ceremony. Gumpas refused to see King Caspian because he didn't have an appointment, but the Narnians entered the castle anyway. Gumpas was unwelcoming, but he had seen Caspian's warship sail past, signalling the rest of the fleet, and he was afraid. Caspian ordered Gumpas to stop trading slaves, and when he refused, Caspian sacked him as governor and appointed Lord Bern in his place. Caspian, Bern, and Drinian went to find the slave market, where Bern ordered everyone to pay respects to the King of Narnia. Caspian announced that the slave trade was no longer legal, and every slave was to be freed immediately. Lucy, Edmund, and Reepicheep were delighted to be reunited with their shipmates. Eustace remained sulky, even though he had been released. That night they celebrated with a great feast. The ship was loaded with supplies, ready to continue her journey in search of the other 6 lords and Aslan's country.